All right, so let's take and use our shell command in order to remove a vast majority of the material and leave us a nice, consistent, thin-walled body that we've got here. So the shell command's right here below draft in that modifying area of the toolbar. And let's specify, pretty thin, half millimeter wall thickness here. Any faces that we select in this box are going to be removed, and then the wall thickness is applied. We do have the ability to set multiple thicknesses, meaning that we can specify individual faces and determine their thickness individually. But we wanted to stand with our standard half inch or half millimeter thickness, and we want to specify that these two faces are removed, and then the entire back face is to be removed. We can choose the show preview. It's going to do a little calculation, and whenever we see our yellow preview, that lets us know that we're going to be able to get a result out of that. If you don't see the preview, it means you're probably got something too thick. Fillets are not quite large enough. There's something that needs to be modified in order for that to work. And you can see very quickly I'm able to take that geometry and hollow that out or shell our surface in order to give us the plastic injection molding shape that we want. Very, very cool feature, but you do have to have pretty clean geometry. You can have problems with having surfaces that intersect one another and don't allow for that offset. It's basically an offset of all those surfaces that we did not select. Now that we've got that, I want to come in to the back view. Use the Control 2 to get to a back. I want to sketch in a circle that's going to be a mounting area for our slider or our advancer that's part of that disc viewer. And so right there on the front plane, I want to create a circle right at the origin. Give that a dimension of 20 millimeters. And then I'm going to do an extrusion on that. We want to set our extrusion at 3 degrees. And then I want to specify this to be a thin feature. And I'm going to give that our same half millimeter thickness. Make sure that it's extruding in the right direction. And I'm going to use the up to next extrusion end condition. And that'll allow that to go and blend in that in where we need it to be. We also can choose the draft outward, which is going to allow it to create exactly the feature that we need. So now that you can see, I get a little circular boss that's in there that starts at a half millimeter, gets thicker as it goes. If you know anything about plastics or SolidWorks plastics, we might need to run an analysis on this, but because of that 3 degrees, it's going to get pretty thick down there right as it hits the bridge. That might cause a heat sink or an imperfection whenever we get to actually doing a plastics analysis on this and understanding what having that extra material is going to do to the cooling rate of that and the shrinkage of that part. But since we're working on the lesson of building geometry, let's stick to that, and we'll pick up our plastics analysis at another time. So one of the things that we want to do here is I want to create a couple of stiffening ribs that's going to go along here. And so I'm going to use that same front plane that we've been working with all along and start another sketch. And one of the neat things about using the rib tool is I don't have to be exact. Let me get a center line in here based off the origin, so that way I can do a little mirroring. Again, I like to pre-select. If you pre-select the center line in your entities and choose mirror, it doesn't ask you which one's which. It just takes care of it for you. I also want to specify that edge and that line are going to be parallel to one another. It's better to do the relationship before you do the dimension. Otherwise, it's going to think that you're trying to do an angle dimension to that. So put that at 0.5, and that gets at the direction that I want it to be. And we can look at this. So most of the time when we're in here talking about these things, we're trying to get you to fully define all of your geometry. But rib is one of the instances and features where we don't have to fully define it. And what I mean by that is these endpoints don't need to contact any of the geometry. And the reason why is the rib tool is going to go up to next in 3 directions. It's going to go up to next down into our shell, but then it's also going to extend itself until it reaches another wall. So our rib tool is found under the features toolbar, and you'll see whenever we've got this kind of sketch, there's a lot of things that are grayed out and not available to us. But that rib tool that sits right in the middle of the modify area of the features toolbar allows us to come in here and specify, say 5mm thickness, and we can specify the direction that we want this to go. Notice the arrows going up. We want to flip the direction, have that go back down into our shell. We can specify draft angle. It by default is going to be at outward, and then we can choose which body that we want that to affect. Click on the green check mark, and you're going to see now that we created stiffening ribs in here very quickly, very easily, and it uses the up to next feature. Now, one of the things I told you earlier is we try to keep a very consistent draft angle. But it's pretty obvious to me that, especially after looking at getting the rib feature in there, 3 degrees is just too much for the last 2 features that I created. So let's come in here and select on those and make a design change. Let's drop those down to 1 degree. That's something that's going to be a little bit more reasonable for this type of geometry and not creating too much thickness in our features.